In the heart of Canada lies a battleground. They say, as goes Peterborough, so goes the nation.
If you've done such a great job, why Curve Lake First Nation had to file a class action lawsuit to get clean drinking water against your government?
The Peterborough riding has been bellwether for decades. In 2025, the stakes have never been higher.
Parliament has been paralyzed for months.
With Canada's economy on the line, with American tariffs squeezing our industries, and a Liberal Party in crisis,
I intend to resign as party leader, as Prime Minister.
Peterborough is more than just a riding. It's the key to Canada's future. This April, your riding, your election, your vote. Here is your moderator, Jay Abrams.
Welcome to Your Vote on YourTV. I'm Jay Amer. I'll be your host for Candidates Debate here at the studios on Goodfellow Road in Peterborough. Thanks for joining us, and I'll go over the rules for today's debate. But before we get started, I want to mention the NDP candidate Heather Ray let us know about an hour ago she wasn't able to make it today. So we'll be moving on with the three candidates who are here. And I'll introduce those candidates, and we'll see a short bio shortly. But first of all, I just wanted to say that during the debate, each candidate will have 2 minutes to respond to each question that will be presented. We'll allow for rebuttals if a direct reference is made to another candidate or their party, and we can grant some additional time if needed. And after each question, there will be an opportunity for open debate if one of the candidates wants to carry on. And we will not be having opening statements. We're going to show you a quick bio shortly. We will have closing statements. There was a random draw that was taken just before we got into the studio, and that order will follow the first question order, and the closing debates will be Jasmine, Emma, and Michelle, and you're going to hear about who those people are right now.
Michelle Ferrari has been the Member of Parliament for Peterborough-Kawartha since 2021. A former broadcaster and entrepreneur, Michelle has built a reputation as a passionate advocate for families, small businesses, and mental health initiatives. She has been a strong voice in Parliament, focusing on affordability, healthcare, and community development. Committed to delivering results for her constituents, Michelle brings energy and dedication to the race. Your Conservative Party of Canada candidate is Michelle Ferrari. Emma Harrison is the Liberal candidate for Peterborough. A longtime advocate for community development, Emma has worked tirelessly to support local businesses, improve healthcare access, and invest in education. With a background in public policy and a passion for making a difference, she is committed to bringing practical solutions to the challenges facing Peterborough residents. Emma believes in collaboration, progress, and a strong local economy. Your Liberal candidate is Emma Harrison. Jasmine Rain is the Green Party candidate for Peterborough. A passionate advocate for environmental sustainability, social justice, and community-driven solutions, Jasmine has dedicated her career to creating positive change. With a background in environmental activism and nonprofit leadership, she works to support grassroots initiatives that empower local communities. Jasmine believes in bold climate action, affordable housing, and a more equitable economy. She is committed to representing Peterborough with integrity, compassion, and a vision for a greener future. Your Green Party candidate is Jasmine Rain.
Well, there's a brief introduction, and I'm really delighted to have all these candidates in the studio. Welcome back. It's been a few weeks since we started out with interviews with each of you, and it's been broadcast on YourTV, and people really enjoyed getting to know people they didn't know, and it's been a bit of a haul. You've had, I don't know how many debates since those interviews we did way back at the start of the campaign, but I'm really glad to have you here today. And I just want to mention the draw we did, we will be asking the first respondent will be Michelle, followed by Emma, and then Jasmine. And we do have a timer, and you will hear a dinging sound. When your time is up, with a bit of a warning, 15 seconds before your time's up actually. And again, we'll let the flow carry on. We don't want to cut anybody off during the discussion. The question I always like to ask candidates, are you having fun yet?
Yeah. Always, Jay.
You're all smiling.
Always. We're having a good time.
I had the pleasure of attending a debate at Lakefield College School in Lakefield, obviously, and I know you've done several since then, but we really appreciate you taking the time to be here today. And we're going to ask a series of questions just to get to know you a bit more, find out about your parties. I mean, it's a very dynamic campaign. Things are changing almost daily. And we'll start with you, Michelle. The first question I'm going to ask, just a general question. The last election was in 2021. It's been almost 4 years. What is the activity that you're most proud of that you were involved with in the last 4 years, either as the MP, incumbent, or in your personal life?
Thanks for that question, Jay. Yeah, there's been a lot that's happened. I worked in opposition, which is often a bit of a challenge because you're going against the grain. But the thing that I went into politics for is the thing that I've been fighting for significantly in the last 4 years. So homelessness and addiction is still a very serious issue within Peterborough. I was very fortunate to be able to prosecute the safe supply that was happening, which isn't actually safe supply, and push for the government to push back on that. And we have put forward some policies in this election to invest in treatment and recovery. We want to treat people who are dealing with addiction. The other thing that I'm very proud about is I was able to secure $19.8 million for the Bonaccord project. It's actually built, so this is 85 units of housing with supports, which is great. I have some friends that are in there, so that's wonderful to see that. And obviously standing up for victims of crime, that's been a huge issue. Bill C-75 is the catch and release liberal bill. And unfortunately, we have a local woman, Selena Taylor from Curve Lake First Nation, who was murdered by a predator who was out on bail, and was able to stand up for her family and share that horrible story. We've also lost a lot of people to overdoses in our community, and fighting for the change that we need to see in the country to redirect funding from drugs to treatment and recovery. Also the carbon tax and the affordability. Obviously I was able to read a lot of your stories and fight and bring your voice to Ottawa. People are struggling. 50% of Canadians are $200 away from claiming bankruptcy. And the carbon tax was a huge factor in that. So prosecuting it and proving that it was costing more than people were getting back. Those are just a few of the things that I was able to do while in power for the last 4 years. But our office has also been huge on customer service, which I'm very proud of as well. Thanks, Jay.
Great. Thank you, Michelle. And although you're both new to the political game, we want to ask the same question. Emma, will ask you next. What have you been doing the last 4 years, and what are you most proud of accomplishing in that time?
In the last 4 years, my family and I purchased my family's farm. So my husband and I and our 3 children now run my family's farm. We have established a small cattle herd, and we are slowly building away as farming does. It takes a really long time to get established. So we were able to purchase 3 bred cattle in 2021, and now we're moving forward to continue as best we can working with climate change and all the struggles that farmers have right now. So we're really proud to get going and to also be able to farm with our family.
Great, thank you. All right, Jasmine, same question. We'll move over to you. And I should say you can look at the camera, you can look at me, whatever works for you. Okay.
Cool, thank you. No, that's a good question, and one that for me is a little bit difficult. Maybe there's so many things that I'm proud to be a part of, even if I'm not necessarily proud of myself. I'm mostly just very grateful to have been in some of these spaces. But to answer your question more satisfyingly, in the last 4 years, I completed a master's degree at Wilfrid Laurier University, where I was working as the exam coordinator for the Accessible Learning Center to make sure that students were able to write their exams with as few barriers to access as possible. And I learned a lot doing that. And then coming to do my doctorate, I was serving as the Equity Commissioner for the Graduate Student Union or Association, and then was elected to the role of president, where I've been serving for a couple of years. And I've had the opportunity to work with really strong and engaging, brilliant students. I've also had the opportunity to be a course instructor at a couple of different universities, and it's just been a time of really intense learning and privilege, and I'm proud to have been a part of that.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jasmine. We'll move on to some questions about topics that are on the national table. And I want to ask you a question about climate change and energy. The Peterborough region has experienced several intense weather disasters in the recent years, just in the last recent weeks. The City of Peterborough and other communities are exploring and implementing local actions to mitigate climate change. Are local efforts enough, and what is the role of the federal government in addressing this issue? And Jasmine, we'll start with you.
That's a great question. Thank you very much. The Green Party proposes halting all new fossil fuel developments and redirecting subsidies away from oil and gas companies towards clean energy investments, which I firmly support. We also support the construction of a national electric grid running east to west and a plan to eliminate interprovincial trade barriers in the energy sector. We also think about Quebec's resistance to pipelines, and we think that that should be respected. And a new national emergency response agency needs to be established as a part of our broader climate and energy strategy.
Thank you. Emma, same question, and I can repeat any question if anybody wants me to during the course.
Thank you. So as a farmer, Mother Nature is my boss, and so we know firsthand and are experiencing the devastation of climate change. The ice storm destroyed not only our property, but all the farms around us and a huge swath across central Ontario. So we know we need to start working harder in mitigating climate change and working with solutions that we know, such as working towards building more clean energy in the federal government. And under Prime Minister Carney, we know that is going to be a necessity moving forward. We can't continue to wait. We are seeing it all the time. With just the devastation, flooding downtown Peterborough, visiting lots of businesses who are working throughout the night, emptying out water because of their sub pumps have finally stopped working, or having to run out and try to get a new sub pump. So we know that we need to get going, and we need to get going now, and that's exactly what the Liberals' plan is to do.
Thank you very much. And Michelle, over to you on climate change and what are local efforts enough in this? What can the federal government do, or what should they be doing?
Thanks, Jay. Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Canadians are good stewards of the land. We know that. They're good people. The Auditor General Canada did a report, and that says Canada has only reduced emissions by 7.1% since 2005, leaving us on track to miss the 40 to 45% reduction target by 2030. This report makes it clear that the Liberals are running out of time and excuses while Canadians fall further behind. And their solution was carbon tax. And as we know, and everybody knows, that hasn't done anything except made people poorer. And so that is not working. So the Conservatives have technology over taxes as our solution. We will remove all carbon taxes. You know, we've heard Mark Carney say that he is going to keep the industrial carbon tax, and we know that that's also going to be downloaded to the consumer, and has given no explanation of how that's going to impact everybody or how he's going to do that. We are going to build the energy corridor. So this is critical for everybody to develop our energy and to stand strong against the United States. We also have a national energy strategy, which is to unlock Canada's energy resources with ethical development, adhering to environmentally responsible practices while enhancing energy security. People and Canadians are naturally ethically, they work ethically, but they can't do the projects that they want to do because the permitting is so slow in this country. So we also need to speed that up, and we need to help people and empower the people who want to help our planet and help our communities actually be able to build the things that do that. Thank you.
Thanks, Michelle. Your party leader was mentioned. Emma, did you want to comment on that, or we can move on to the next question?
I think it's just best to move on.
All right. We're gonna come to you with the next question, Emma. It's cost of living. Cost of living keeps rising while many basic job wages remain stagnant. What's your party's solution to address affordability for the average citizen?
Certainly, we hear that all the time, and knocking doors and meeting lots of people in our community. They're rightfully very, very concerned. So affordability, middle-class tax cut, which will save families on average $825. And we are going to make sure that dental care is expanded to include more Canadians who need it, because I think people forget, people without benefits, it's a barrier that they cannot receive dental care, which is a huge problem, as well as continuing with $10 a day childcare and expanding the amount of places that people are able to have their children in daycare and be able to make those payments, because it's incredibly expensive. Creating more affordable housing, as well as making sure that small businesses have more capital to be able to expand their businesses and hire more workers. So yeah, we're working very hard and continuing programs that are currently established that people are relying on to stay afloat.
All right, Michelle, we're going to come back to you for comments on the cost of living and what your party will do to help address the issue.
Listen, Jay, you have to acknowledge how you got to a problem to solve a problem. And you've had 10 years of Liberals who told you there was going to be sunny ways, life was going to be more affordable, and never before have Canadians worked so hard to have so little. You know, as I said earlier, 50% of Canadians are $200 away from claiming bankruptcy. The people who are standing on the edge, many of them have went over. Our suicide rates are through the roof. And you have seniors on fixed incomes who don't know how they're going to make the payments. You know, it's the median income, 60% of the median income is going toward housing. There's nothing left over for food. And yesterday, food prices went up again, the highest increase in decades. You can't keep doing the same thing and expecting different results. The Liberals told Canadians they would spend, and this is the result of that. So the Conservatives have a plan. We have a solid plan. We're going to cut income tax by 15%. We're going to cut all of the carbon tax. Mark Carney is going to leave that industrial carbon tax on. It's going to cost $14 billion. He's promising a new $14 billion carbon tax on energy, steel, and aluminum. Yet a new poll finds that 70% of Canadians believe that businesses will pass on the increased carbon tax costs along to consumers. Life is going to get more expensive if he does this. Canadians cannot afford a fourth Liberal term. We have to restore the economy. We have to build our resources. Canada should be the richest country in the world, and we can be. We just have to have a leader courageous enough to build those resources. This can't go on any longer. We have the highest food bank usage in history, and that has to stop.
Thanks, Michelle. Jasmine, same question, if you want me to repeat it, or
No, we're good.
you're ready to go? Okay.
Yes, Canada is absolutely one of the richest countries in the world, but it's concentrated into the 1% of earners. 1% of Canadians control 26% of Canada's total wealth. That's preposterous. Statistics Canada is the one that has that stat, and the income inequality has reached the highest levels ever recorded. But I want to just quickly, before I answer it in the way that I would typically, say that it's really easy to scapegoat onto who's been in power in the federal government for the last 10 years. But we've been on a steady decline since the 80s, since the implementation of neoliberalism. So I do not buy that the Conservatives would make anything any better advocating for a free market. And the trickle-down economic strategy that's often touted by many of the economists within these spaces, it's just proven that it doesn't work. So personally, I don't buy that. Now for the Green Party and our platform and my personal convictions, implementing a universal basic income I think is sorely, sorely needed, eliminating all federal income tax on earnings under $40,000 and providing immediate financial relief for lower and middle income Canadians would not be the Band-Aid solution that we are hearing so many people talk about through menial tax cuts. Yeah, but important and very needed tax reform is the solution.
Great, thank you for that. Our next question is going to have to do with crime and justice. And Michelle, we're going to start out with you and then go to Jasmine and then wrap up with Emma on this question. An increase in recidivism, I was hoping I could get that word out, I almost did, related to crime is an issue cited by law enforcement, community leaders and voters that needs to be addressed. How will your party ensure that laws are in place to keep repeat offenders off the streets?
Violent repeat offenders too, Jay. It's insane what has happened in this country. 50% increase in violent crime, 116% increase in gun crime, 354% increase in extortion, 75% increase in sexual assault. It is out of control, and anybody who grew up in Peterborough knows that. This is not the city nor the country that we grew up in. And the big underlying issue of all of this is Bill C-75. This is a bill that was implemented by the Liberals that puts judges in the position to put the least onerous and least restrictive least restrictive consequences on the offender. This creates catch and release. Okay, so you have, I'll give you an example. In British Columbia, you have 40 criminals who are responsible for 6,000 crimes. They rinse and repeat, and they're doing violent offenses. In Peterborough, you have, as I mentioned earlier, Selena Taylor, beautiful woman from Curve Lake First Nation, and her attacker, her predator, was out on bail. You have to repeal Bill C-75. We have a 3 strikes and you're out policy as well. So 3 violent offenses, you are gone. You are not eligible for parole. You are not eligible for bail until you prove you are reformed. You can't keep doing the same thing and expecting different results. We will also crack down on fentanyl traffickers, life imprisonment for anyone who's trafficking over 40 milligrams of fentanyl. That's enough to kill 20 people. We will also increase our scanners at the borders. So we will invest in 2,000 more CBSA officers. Did you know that less than 1% of shipping containers coming across the border are checked with illegal firearms, illegal cars, drugs? You can't keep doing this. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Jasmine, we'll move to you for a response to that question.
Yeah, I just want to, I think, say right at the outset that I encourage viewers, for every single one of us, to be fact-checking the statistics that we're giving you as we say them, because we're all good speakers here. Right? We're all pretty practiced in this, and we say things with a great deal of authority, and it's really easy when someone says something confidently to you to just take it as law. But I really encourage everybody to be fact-checking, everyone, including myself, as we speak. Now, I think that we have a lot of over-incarceration in Canada for non-violent offenders, folks that have been incarcerated for land-based crimes, folks that are incarcerated for pot use now that it's legal. That cannot continue. We can't keep talking about the fact that, you know, prisons are overcrowded, all of this. We're really dodging circles around the fact that we have really intense over-incarceration rates and over-policing rates of certain communities that are also simultaneously underprotected. So if we're talking about missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls, we also have to have the conversation that we're living in a carceral police state that really, really victimizes entire groups of people and over-incarcerates them for things that they should not be incarcerated for.
Thank you. Emma, same question.
We released a lengthy policy on the Liberal Party's stance and what we're going to be doing moving forward with some of the problems that we're seeing, including recruiting more than 1,000 more RCMP personnel to tackle drugs and human trafficking. And for me, increasing funding to public prosecutors, that is long overdue and needed, toughen the criminal code and make bail laws stricter for violent and organized crime, especially for repeat offenders, and something that's really important to me, my husband's a Peterborough paramedic, and invest heavily in first responders and mental health services and other things that they need, and collaborating with the people who are doing the job and see things firsthand. It needs to be a much bigger effort to work collaboratively with the people on the front lines of these problems.
Thank you. You have an opportunity to step in, sure.
So my question then to Ms. Harrison would be, you know, we've had the Justice Minister, I questioned him directly on this. Bill C-75, he said he reformed bail, and yet you have people in our own community who were murdered by people who were out on bail. So when you say you're going to reform bail, what does that mean, and why would anyone believe you?
Because things are different. Times have changed. We have a new leader. We have a new perspective. I don't think...
The same ministers
I'd like
in place.
to answer. I'd like to answer, if you could wait a second. Every party leader is different, and they approach things differently. Mark Carney is a completely different person. And we know now, and we have more data information, that these things need to be done. And so we will do them because...
So you're committing to bail reform, to repealing Bill C-75.
It was released in the policy that is what the commitment is.
You're going to repeal it.
I can't speak directly to that because I don't know.
Why don't you know?
Because it's not currently in the policy, Michelle.
So you don't have a policy to say whether or not you're going to repeal Bill C-75?
No.
Okay.
All right, folks, we're going to move on to defense. Let me just figure out who's going to go first. We're going to have Jasmine, Emma, and then Michelle. The global outlook on cooperative defense is changing, and what is Canada's current role, and what should it be in protecting rights and freedoms in countries that lack their own defense capabilities? Jasmine.
Sorry, would you mind repeating the last sentence?
What is Canada's role? We've been a peacekeeper. We have troops in other countries. We've been involved in conflicts. What do you believe the future role of Canada is when it comes to defense, and what kind of money should be invested in that activity?
Yes. Okay, well, I can give you part of our party answer here, especially with our defense policy. Yes, Canada has been involved in peacekeeping capacities, and I do mean that in a qualified way in other nations. And I think that now with the threats coming from the Republican administration, with the rise of fascism and with increasingly tenuous global relations, I think it's important to dismantle militarism and to rethink security and to revise our military doctrine to reflect true threats climate chaos, economic exploitation, foreign interference, not through escalation, but through real peace building, sovereignty, and resilience, to reject the F-35 jet deal with Lockheed Martin, to support community-based Arctic and coastal protection, to strengthen Indigenous-led Arctic defense and extend support for Canadian Rangers, to empower civil society through the development of a national defense or response corps, establishing a 100,000-member civilian-led federal home guard to respond to climate disaster, infrastructure needs, and sovereignty threats. We have a number of others, including but not limited to ending all arms exports to regimes that violate human rights.
Thank you. Emma, the same question.
The Liberal government is committed to reaching our 2% target by 2030. And I think the most important part of that is we are going to reinvest and invest heavily in people, the recruitment practices, salaries, and housing, as well as what has been long been asked for, which is increase in availability of childcare. We are reinvesting in equipment, new submarines, drone forces, and icebreakers, and we will work tirelessly for the defense of our Arctic. And I believe that Canada needs to continue to be a part of international efforts to be peacekeepers and protect our allies and the people who need it.
Michelle, we'll have you on this question.
This is obviously a pretty serious issue. You know, why is Canada in the position it is in right now? You know, we've got to invest in our Canadian forces, and we have incredible Canadian forces. We have incredible cadets here in Peterborough. And there should be a pride attached to signing up for the Canadian Forces. And pride comes with investing in them. So we will absolutely meet our target as well. We've committed to a first ever base in Iqaluit, which is incredible. And I think you're going to see this is going to be a critical piece of how we maintain our sovereignty as well. Arctic sovereignty is a massive issue. And we have our Arctic. So we're going to be committed to that and restoring the pride that once existed. I want to tell a quick story if I can. I was out in New Brunswick and Gagetown, and I was at a food bank, Oromakto Food Bank, and they have the highest use of food bank they've ever had in history. I was talking to the woman there, Jane, and she was standing in front of a map, and I noticed Gagetown was there, which is a Canadian Forces base. I said, well, you don't have anybody from, the base using the food bank. And she said, yeah, Michelle, we have 40 to 50 families who rely on a food bank every month. Canadian Forces families relying on food banks. So we got to stop that for sure. Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks. Yep, please, Emma.
Could you then speak to why the Conservatives voted no on past budget increases?
Because you went $60 billion over your guardrail, and you've driven up a debt that is at $1 trillion.
So then we don't invest? So then the Conservatives agreed that to then not invest in our military?
You absolutely need to invest in your military.
But you didn't. So then why would you vote no to increases?
Tell me what we voted no to.
To increasing past military budgets.
We voted no to your budgets. Your budgets
that includes investing in the military. It doesn't. That doesn't include investing in the military?
Absolutely it does.
Yep. Then you answered the question. Thanks.
All right, thank you. I do believe we are going to go to a video from another candidate right now. The People's Party of Canada also has a candidate, and we've offered time for all parties that are running candidates, and PPC took us up on that. So we'll move to that, and we'll come back with some more questions for our candidates in studio right after this.
My name is Jamie Lee McMaster, and I'm your candidate for the People's Party of Canada. I'd like to give you a short summary of who I am and how I became involved in politics. My husband and I are small business owners. In 2024, I left my career as a sales rep at Pepsi to assist my husband with the growth of the business. We've been working as a team, trying to build a life and a future. However, 5 years ago, I had aspirations to become a social worker. In 2021, during the pandemic, in my final year of college, just before my placement, I was faced with a tough decision. I decided to withdraw from college rather than have the government make my medical decisions for me. This led me to the PPC and to studying our Charter of Rights and Freedoms. I became strongly devoted to protecting our rights, which are fundamental and objective. The PPC discusses policies I've never heard the other parties talking about: smaller government, less overreach, and putting Canadians' needs before our international friends. As a young worker, I also feel the pressure of the cost of living, housing crisis, and the feeling of not getting very far no matter how hard I worked. I never ended up graduating from college, but it may not have made any difference. According to our federal government, social mobility is in question, and downward mobility may become the norm for future generations. What we've been doing for the last 10 years has not been working, and if we don't change soon, it will get worse. Though some of the PPC's policies are controversial, I think they can shake things up and be the change that Canada needs. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. I ask that you all look into the PPC with an open mind. We may not agree on all policies, but we can agree that saving Canada is important enough to discuss new ideas.
All right, welcome back, and thank you for that. We're going to stick with defense, and it was alluded to earlier, and I'm going to come back with Emma, then Michelle, and Jasmine. It has to do with the Arctic, and many countries are looking to the Arctic as a region, and we think of it as our own, but we share it with about 5 or 6 other countries. It's important to global trade and defense, and since Canada is an important Arctic nation, what would your party do to ensure continued sovereignty in the North with these new challenges? Emma.
We have committed to increasing spending and working collaboratively with Australia to build our early detection with NORAD, as well as investing in the Arctic and the people who live there. We know there's housing crisis everywhere, and that includes in the Arctic. So investing is really the biggest thing that the Liberal Party can do at this time, investing in the North, the people who live there, and the military, and the people who are defending our sovereignty.
Michelle, over to you for the response to the approach to the Arctic.
Yeah, you know what, I think investing in our Arctic is an incredible opportunity. I was very fortunate when I worked at Czech Television to visit CFS Alert, so that's the northernmost inhabited part of the world. It's also Canadian Forces Station Alert during Operation Box Top, which is the refueling up there twice a year. And you don't actually understand the relevance or importance of Arctic sovereignty until you really visit it. And I didn't realize how many people didn't pay attention to why Arctic sovereignty means so much. What does it even mean? Well, it means that we have this huge piece of land, this massive mass of land, and it is vulnerable if it is not protected. And I think, you know, for so long we've been sort of complacent and sort of thought we're fine, we're Canadian, we're good. And obviously we need to invest in that. So the Canadian Forces Station in Iqaluit will be a massive boost for not only the communities there, the Inuit communities there as well, but it will give that sovereignty that we need, especially right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Jasmine, what's the Green Party's position on the Arctic?
Yes, well, we certainly are looking to strengthen Indigenous-led Arctic defense and extend support, as I said, for Canadian Rangers. I also want to note that we're looking to grow community defense, but not corporate control, which is a big departure from kind of what we're talking about here, expanding reserve forces with a real focus on humanitarian support, emergency preparedness, and defending public infrastructure, but not serving military industrial interests.
Thank you. So as we meet today, the Ontario legislature has just come back with the throne speech, and one of the big topics for the first sitting earlier today, as we're here in studio, has to do with interprovincial trade. I'm going to start with Michelle on this one. What is the party position of your party on the issue of interprovincial trade? And a lot of people don't realize that there are barriers between all provinces and territories. We hear a lot about the US and open trade and different things. But Michelle, what would your party do, and what's the position on interprovincial trade in the future?
Yeah, thanks, Jay. Yeah, a lot of people don't understand how restrictive it is within our own country. It really doesn't make very much sense. One of the great policies that I love is if you're a trade person, it's very costly to go and travel and go work as your trade in another province. The Conservatives have put forward a policy so that you can be trained across all of these provinces without having to spend money on licensing, all of these things. So it's a national standard. I think that's going to be huge for our trades, because what we need to do is build. We need to build our resources and invest in 350,000 trade workers. You know, you're going to have to incentivize provinces. You're going to have to develop these relationships, and all governments are going to have to sit down and work together on this. There has to be an incentive, a carrot and stick, so to speak, because if there's federal tax coming back to the feds as a result of resources being developed, that should be incentivized back to the provinces to encourage them to remove those barriers that are in place. And so I think that's going to be a key factor in, it's got to be a win-win for everybody, and I think it can be a win-win for everybody because we have everything this world needs, and we should be able to do that across our country much more easily. So we have some great policies to ensure that those trade barriers are removed. Thank you.
Thank you. Jasmine, we'll come to you and ask you about your party's position on international, or interprovincial trade.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So we haven't published our official platform yet, and this may not be my exact area of expertise, but I do believe that especially in cases like this, there's often an abundance of opportunities for very important collaboration and very careful policy making. Now, I'll also note, as I do every single debate, and I will continue to shout from the rooftops, the Green Party, all of the members of Parliament and MP candidates are empowered to speak our own minds and to vote in the way that we think is best in Parliament, and to speak our minds in these situations as well. So I do think reducing barriers to trade interprovincially is an important thing, recognizing that there's a high level of complexity that, you know, a lot of us don't have access to, is folks that aren't the ones facilitating these trades. So something that I do in my life and in my career as a budding researcher and a baby teacher is you're constantly negotiating with people and moving forward with curiosity and openness and humility. And I think that that's what this requires.
Thank you, Jasmine. And Emma, your party position on interprovincial trade.
Like to echo what Jan's saying, we need to work collaboratively. The federal government needs to work with provincial governments, and we've already seen that with Mark Carney sitting down with with our premiers and knowing that we need one economy, not 13, including doctors being able to move freely within our country, so they are able to live and work where they desire, and our tradespeople as well, creating either a universal standard for our country, so those people are able to work where they would like and be able to move and be able to help the areas that need these professionals the most. So for me, it's, we have to continue to work collaboratively and together, and that's the theme of this whole election, is working, becoming one unified country and working together, because we do have everything that we need right here. We just need to work together to make sure that we're taking care of each other.
Great. Thank you, Emma. I'm going to ask a question about, and we'll go Jasmine, Emma, then Michelle, and this has to do with foreign policy. And what is the primary issue, not tariffs, because I'm going to talk about that later with the U.S., primary issue for Canada on the global stage in regards to foreign policy, and how will your government address the issue? So what is, if you take away everything that's been going on, what's the other prime issue for your party that we want to see Canada involved with?
I mean, we can only take that off the table so much in this conversation, because it's obviously tainting international relations in a very significant way. One of the things that we're proposing is to move the United Nations headquarters to Canada and to establish a coalition with Pacific and European allies to fund global initiatives abandoned by the U.S. under the Republican administration. We're also really pushing to recognize a Palestinian state and to back the International Criminal Court and International Court of Justice, and also to support Ukraine with moral and economic assistance, and to end weapons exports to countries with poor human rights records.
Thank you. And Emma, we'll move to you on that question.
As much as I'd love to ignore the U.S. and their influence on everything that they're doing, it is affecting relations with Russia, Ukraine, and with the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. I don't think we can ignore it. I know you'd like to.
Well, we're not ignoring it.
No, but that is, it's all interrelated. It's all interrelated,
yes.
And all the things we're struggling with is because the U.S. is crumbling, and they are going around trying to bully and police the world. And so we need to, again, unify our country and come together, because our economy is under attack. And we simply cannot have that. And it's interwoven in all foreign relations right now, so we can come back, but
And we will. There is a question on that later, but the question was the primary issue not related to tariffs. If there's one, Michelle, you want to address?
Well, I think a lot of this comes back to, restoring our relationships, but also our reputation on the international stage. We are sitting very low in the OECD of so many things. I look at teen mental health, for example. Children First released a report on where children sit in mental health and where we sit on a global stage. But I think the really big thing that we need to do, obviously on the global stage, is ensure that the world has access to what we have. Japan and Germany knocked on Canada's door asking for our LNG. And Justin Trudeau said there was no business case for this. And that looks bad on an international stage. It also makes us weak when we have the very resource that could help us stand independently, sovereign, and be the richest country in the world. So, you know, just for context, folks, like we have the 3rd most oil, the 5th most gas, the 1st most uranium, 1st potash, 5th most farmland. We have the, you know, largest oceanic coastline. We have fresh water, we have lithium, we have hydroelectricity. We have everything. And a lot of people look to Canada to be leaders. And in the last 10 years, we haven't been that. And, you know, and a lot of that is, it's a lack of leadership. So we look forward to restoring that and giving the world what Canada has to offer. Thank you.
Thank you all, and thank you for that answer to that question. The next one I'm going to ask about, Michelle, we'll come back to you, and then Emma, and then Jasmine will work our way back here. And this has to do with government spending or non-spending. And the question is, where can the government cut spending, and where does it need to increase investment? Michelle, we'll start with you.
Well, I think you have a massive lack of accountability and corruption issue. For the last few months before Parliament was forced to be shut down, we were debating the Green Slush Fund. This is $400 million that was going to Liberal insiders and not doing what it was intended to do. There's a huge amount of waste. We have 149,000 more federal regulations. Consultants are up over $22 million more dollars. And what have we gotten in exchange for it? The waste is significant. You know, when we were challenging the budget, the guardrail was supposed to be $40 billion for a deficit. That is outrageous in itself. It ended up being over $60 billion. We are now $1 trillion in debt. Where is that money going? What have you gotten in return for it? 46% of your income goes to taxes. What are you getting in return for it? And you know, you'll have, you know, my colleague here today has said, well, a lot's changed. We have a new leader. Well, that leader is the same person who was the economic advisor to Justin Trudeau for the last 5 years. He's surrounded by the same ministers. This affordability crisis is not happenstance. And to my other colleague's point, yes, we've been in decline, but never this significantly in this short amount of time. This is unprecedented to have the highest food bank usage in history, where people can't even afford to pay their bills. This is the issue of this election. You cannot afford a 4th Liberal term. So you have to cut income tax, you have to build the resources. And Mark Carney has said repeatedly he will not repeal Bill C-69, he will not build those resources. So we have to build the resources, we have to cut the income tax, and we have to restore the budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Emma, we're going to let Emma answer that and respond to some of those comments, and then we'll come to you, Jasmine. But the question was, where can government cut spending? Where does it need to increase investment? And you can certainly comment on anything that was spoken about.
We know the best way to reduce deficit and debt is through economic development and growth, and so that is just what we are going to do. We have, is there someone better than Prime Minister Mark Carney to lead us forward through economic growth? I think too it's really important to, when we look at affordability and the spending, the Conservative Party's complete neglect of accepting climate change as a really huge aspect of the spending we're seeing not only throughout the government but also out of people's pockets every day, and with food and insurance. I think it's really important that we look at the important role of mitigation in climate change when we look at all of these issues, because that is what we're up against, and that is what is also driving huge financial issues.
Jasmine, your party's plan for reducing spending and investing money where it's needed.
Yeah, I would like to respond first,
Sure.
if that's okay.
Yeah.
I think if we're talking about this being like the crisis of our time and needing to develop our resources, all the things that you say, and I'm not, this isn't a personal attack, because I understand that you are both really kneecapped by having to toe the party line, and you can't speak out of turn in that. And I've had some space for that. But I fail to see how any of the things that are being proposed by the Conservative administration, by the Conservative government, would do anything better than what the Liberals are doing, because you're not investing in social spending, right? We're looking to kind of cut taxes, but cutting taxes across the board, right? We're looking to develop non-renewable energy, which is there are a number of problems with that. And there's spending money to make money, yes, but we could just tax multinational, multi-billion-dollar corporations, and that could be what we do. That should be what we're doing. There are so many different things that we can do to get us out of this hole, and we're just talking about Band-Aid solutions. And I also want to say, I do know that the provincial Conservatives and the Canadian Conservatives are two different parties, but they're based on the same central tenets. And that's not good. We're not getting anywhere good, regardless. And I think anybody here in Ontario that can't find a family doctor that's battling against semi-privatized healthcare, we all know this. It's a common sense thing. Now with the Green Party, obviously we're looking to implement a significant wealth tax, to implement tax reform.
Yeah, Michelle, please do. Yep.
Just back to Ms. Harrison's comment about Conservatives and climate change. We didn't have a $400 million green slush fund. The Liberals did. This was an Auditor General report that violated ethics, that gave money to companies who did not spend the money on green energy projects that it was supposed to spend on. We have not hit one emission target under the Liberals. So if somebody doesn't believe in climate change, it's not the Conservatives, it's the Liberals.
Emma, did you want to respond to that at all?
No, I'm good.
Okay. All right, let's move on to something that it's an issue. We do hear about it, and it's something that's quite topical and has to do with guns. And Canada has introduced increasing restrictions on types of guns allowed to be privately owned in the country, and gun sports remain popular. However, illegal weapons smuggled in from the U.S. are the real issue. How can this flow of illegal arms be stopped? And we're going to start with you, Emma, then Jasmine, then Michelle. And I'll throw in there, should assault-style non-hunting weapons continue to be banned in Canada?
First, training 1,000 new CBSA officers to crack down not only on guns, but drugs and those things coming into our country. I am from a long line of hunters, and my family, and those are some of the most respectful, safe gun owners that I know, who store their firearms properly, they travel with their firearms properly, but when firearms are used in a violent manner, I do believe the federal government needs to play a role in restricting access to those weapons.
Thank you. And Jasmine, we'll move to you on that question.
Certainly, yes. Well, I personally feel that if you're using a firearm to enact food sovereignty to secure the conditions of your survival in a time when grocery prices are skyrocketing with no interference or help from the nation state in a significant way, yes, of course, I'm in full support of that. And then the Green Party is looking to demilitarize borders, but to increase civilian-led border monitoring to help to intercept the flow of illicit weapons and also to prevent growing human exploitation.
Thank you. Michelle, what's your party's position on guns?
So never before have we seen such an attack on law-abiding firearms owners and sport shooters. And what I witnessed in my last 4 years under what the Liberals did to law-abiding firearms owners is abysmal. And locally here in our own riding, we have a huge hunting and angling community in Peterborough, one of the largest actually in the country. And we have manufacturers who were told by the Liberal government to go ahead and manufacture guns, only to then put out all of their money. Then they retracted that and pulled that away. It's insane what has been done to law-abiding firearms owners. And this is not just me, this is Toronto police associations across the board. And I just want to read to you what the Toronto Police Associations said. Criminals did not get your message. Our communities are experiencing a 45% increase in shootings and a 62% increase in gun-related homicides compared to this time last year. What difference does your handgun ban make when 85% of guns seized by our members can be sourced to the United States? Your statement, Liberal statement, and this was to Justin Trudeau, is out of touch and offensive to victims of crime and police officers everywhere. Whatever you think you've done to improve community safety has not worked. We will scan those shipping containers that are coming across the borders. Less than 1% are being scanned right now. We will invest in 2,000 CBSA officers to do those scans, and we need to crack down on crime. You cannot let people out, violent repeat offenders who are out on bail, who are doing these crimes and have illegal firearms, and leave hunters alone and sport shooters. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to move on to a healthcare question, and Jasmine, we'll start with you, then move to Michelle, and then to Emma. The federal government provides significant funding to the provinces and territories through the Canada Health Transfer It's a primary source of federal funding for provincial and territorial health. What will you do as MP to ensure that Peterborough secures its fair share of funding from the province, and where should it be directed? Jasmine.
Yeah, well, that's a great question. Just in general, in terms of healthcare, and this is outside of just myself as an MP, let's say the Greens were to be elected, because I do want to say this, it is important. There's a plan to expand Canada's public healthcare system to include full coverage of mental health services, free prescription medications for all, investing in recruiting and training healthcare workers, to reduce wait times and to enhance access to home and community care. Personally, I would be looking at working with institutions like the Ontario Medical Association, with the LHINs, to really talk about what individual communities need, because it does change, and the province can't tell us what we need. We know what we need. Our physicians know what we need. Our nurses, our nurse practitioners, our PSWs, patients, waiting for access to healthcare. So it would be driven by robust community consultation. Though if I were the MP, which, you know, if I were the MP, that would be the fight. Thank you very
much. All right, Michelle, same question to you.
Repeat it for me, please.
The question ultimately was, what would you do to ensure that Peterborough secures its fair share of funding from the province, and where should it be directed from the federal funding that flows down?
Thanks, Jay. You know what? I just want to give a shout out to our healthcare workers right now. You know what? They do incredible work, and unfortunately, locally at PRHC, one of the things that is crippling our ER the most is addictions, and there is nowhere for people to go that are struggling with addiction, and it is a very, very challenging time for the people working the front line. And they do a great job, but they need some help. So right now, just for context, we are paying more in servicing our debt than we are in healthcare transfers. Again, this comes back to wasteful spending, an out of control budget, and you know, you can't keep doing this. You need economic stability. So we also have a great program in place called the Blue Seal program. Currently right now in Canada, there are around 60,000 nurses and doctors who are qualified. There are nurses and doctors who cannot practice in this country. 6 million Canadians are without a family doctor. And this is unreasonable for people trying to access healthcare. So our Blue Seal program would fast track. We would create a national standardized test that would allow people who are qualified to be doctors and nurses to practice within 30 days of completing this test. And that would ease up a lot of the folks. You know, the joke, it's a sad joke, but right now it's like, if you need a doctor, call an Uber. And it's ridiculous, right? So we will have a great Blue Seal program to help with that. Thank you.
Thank you. Emma, what would you do as MP to ensure Peterborough secures funding, and where should it be directed?
Certainly. We do have a lack of family doctors, nurses, PSWs, all across the board. So we are committed to investing in people who would like to be retrained and would like to create a new career for themselves by helping to fund their education. But we also need to, delivery is primarily from the provincial government. But in my own opinion, we need more transparency of where that funding is going. And currently, we just don't have that. We need the investments from the federal government need to be consistent with the principles and follow the principles of the Canada Health Act by public administration, comprehensiveness, universality, portability, and accessibility. And currently, that is where we're falling really, really short as well when it comes to immigration, making sure that we are able to secure foreign doctors and nurses and the people who are qualified to get going and help. Sorry, I thought you were going to say something. And help, make up for those gaps that we have in the healthcare system, because we see them everywhere all the time. My husband's a paramedic. There was an offload delay at the hospital for a crazy long time that people were unaware there was not a single ambulance available in the county of Peterborough. And they were lined up in front for hours, sometimes their whole shift. So we need the provincial governments to get going, and we need to see where that funding is going.
Thank you. You want to jump in? Sure.
If we're talking about the Blue Seal program, and I personally think that that's a great idea. I think that that's really needed. Now, my question here is for Michelle, and I personally know of a number of researchers that are doctoral students and candidates that are nurse practitioners and nurse practitioner educators, and they are doing state-sponsored research, woke research, as Polyev would be, I guess, calling it, to solve this problem in a way that's evidence-backed. It's done with a lot of care, with a robust amount of community consultation, and now he's threatening to claw back funding for researchers such as myself, these people that are doing good, hard work. They're dedicating their lives to do this. So what would you say to that?
I'd like to see where he said that he's going to claw back funding.
Well, the interview was out 2 days ago. He's been quoted saying it, that he will no longer be providing funding to woke researchers at doctoral level.
Why is your research woke?
This research would be considered woke because it's often led by members from underserved and underrepresented communities that are talking about helping folks secure pathways to citizenship, folks that are being discriminated against by a system that prioritizes folks immigrating from largely, I'm just going to call spade a spade, white countries, right? It's there, and this is not my area of research. I'm not a subject matter expert in the field. I'm okay with saying that, but there are people doing this research, and as somebody that exists with them in these spaces, they are spoken down to as though it's woke research because it does involve equity, diversity, considerations around inclusion. So I would invite you, if you can't answer it now, to go and watch the interview and to reflect on that.
I'm just asking for specific research. I don't think anything specific was named. That's what I was trying to get from you. But I think the big piece is you have to have results tied to it. That's what we've seen, a waste of money. So I think actually we're saying the same thing. You have to have results tied to what you're doing. If you don't have results, but if you don't have outcomes based on that.
Yeah. Right. I also want to say very, very clearly that there is an issue within implementation science. Again, this is not what I'm doing my doctorate in. It is something I'm interested in. But a lot of the new knowledges that are being produced by our foremost scientists do not get implemented in policy spaces because you get politicians and policymakers that are too egomaniacal or too encumbered by party lines to actually start to take up this new knowledge that's being generated and implemented. I see this literally all the time with my work, with the work of my colleagues. We were just talking about the Research for Social Change Lab with Naomi Nichols. This is something that all of us are experiencing, and if the government continues to defund higher education, it's just going to get worse, and we're going to get more unbelievably short-sighted policies, which is what I'm seeing Poilievre campaign on. It's like a lot of fascist rhetoric, and I was deeply concerned to hear that, and I hope that you are too. And I hope that you go and watch that and you do some thinking beyond, got to be backed by policy, got to be backed by science, because we produce the knowledge, it is backed. You defend a dissertation, it's peer-reviewed, it's published, and then it goes nowhere. So whatever happens, I hope that you take that with you and you think about that.
Michelle, do you want to respond or leave it at that?
Yeah, sorry.
All right, there, Emma?
The party does use the word woke frequently. And so being part of that party, what does that mean to you, woke?
I don't know if I have a definition of it. I think it's changed terms. I think everybody takes a word and then they change it throughout their time. And I think I think it used to be socialism. Now they've changed it to wokeism. And I think everybody changes the language of it. I think the key is that people aren't worried about what color you are, what gender you are. What they care about is having opportunity to be able to pay for their families. They have the opportunity
about that because you film in people's bathrooms. You're filming in bathrooms, and I know this is something that people go to, and I wasn't going to do it, but in its current iteration, how do you define woke? Yeah. And why are people weaponizing this idea of folks that care about other people, care about their communities, are calling truth to power? We're seeing the ways things are shaking out. We're not happy about it. And we can see every single person with our own two eyes that some are getting impacted more than others. And saying that's not right all of a sudden is a reason to dismiss or to defund or to deport. It's fascist. And that's what we're seeing happen. And I think that you have a responsibility as a public-facing person to take a stand against that and to educate yourself as to what you think woke means now, today.
Well, my responsibility and my response to you is the same thing I just said. When people can't afford to live, that is our job to fix that. And it doesn't matter what color you are or what gender you are. Because the reality is,
it's a privilege that maybe you're not aware of, that we do have.
Well, when you can't afford to live and you live in a tent, I think that's where it needs to start. When people are $200 away from bankruptcy.
Well, there's a lot of people in our community who are Indigenous who are experiencing that.
Yes.
And they also want to be able to afford life.
I want to not contribute to the idea that all Indigenous folks are unhoused. That's obviously intensely problematic and perpetuates a very harmful narrative. I think what we need to be thinking about here is, yes, absolutely, Michelle, you're totally correct. We do need to make sure that people can survive. We need to make sure that people aren't starving. But we're not doing nearly enough to create the conditions to solve that. Fracking is not the answer, because the money's not going to come to us folks in this room. It's going to go to the people that are sponsoring and subsidizing these fracking corporations, and we see that in the data, in the statistic. This is very clearly laid out. It's very well documented, and we can see it in the rising income inequality. So what we need to do is something a lot more radical, truly, and I'm sorry, than either parties are ready to do. So people that are watching, you're holding these two to account. I'm holding them to account. This is the time of our lives. It doesn't matter where you vote. It does not matter who you vote for when our crops are burning and we're experiencing drought and people are dying. We don't need people to be starving, but we're making really silly policy decisions not backed by science, not backed by woke activists. Sorry.
Well, thank you. No, excellent discussion, debate, and commentary from everybody. I really appreciate that. I'm going to move on to another question. Michelle, we're going to start with you and then go to Emma and wrap up with Jasmine. And it is kind of related to what we were just talking about. It has to do with immigration. And Peterborough's welcomed new immigrants to the community for many, many years. And as birth rates have declined, immigration allows for new Canadians to support much needed workforce and skilled professions. What will your government do to ensure that immigration policies align with local intake capacity? Michelle.
Thank you so much for this question, Jay. This is a huge issue in our office. The bureaucratic backlog within our immigration policies is absolutely insane. And, you know, almost all of us here are immigrants at one point, right? My family came over on one of the 9 ships, the Peter Robinson immigration. And, you know, you came and you had a hope and you had a dream and you were able to achieve that. You went to work and you did what was asked of you, and you were able to get a house and you were able to have a family and you were able to have a good life. All of that is gone. You know, I have international students who are living in houses with 10, 20 people. They can't find work. They're using the food banks. Immigration has been a complete disaster under the Liberal government. And you know, the former immigration minister lost upwards, they don't even know where 2 million people went. That is not checks and balances. Did you know that there's not even a criminal check on the immigrants that are coming in the country that they're coming from? The criminal check is done here in Canada. Obviously, they don't have a criminal record in Canada. They haven't even got here. You know, immigration, we had the best immigration system in the world. Everybody looked to Canada. And after 10 years of the Liberals, it's been completely decimated. We need to go back to the basic numbers of allowing the number of people in for the amount of resources we have, the right amount of housing, the right amount of food, and ensuring that the people coming in are able to contribute and coexist and have a great life as Canadians. And that's what we need to get back to.
Thanks, Michelle. Emma, what will your party do to ensure that immigration policies align with the local capacities?
We do. We need to set the level of immigration back to pre-pandemic levels that do align with the infrastructure that's available, so that we are providing and are able, the people who are coming here are able to have housing and access to everything that they need. So we will reset immigration back to pre-pandemic levels until we are able to better have more infrastructure available.
Thank you. Jasmine?
Yes, absolutely. The Green Party says that the Greens are looking to coordinate with provinces to set levels based on Canada's ability to support newcomers, proposing spending and suspending the Safe Third Country Agreement with the U.S. and enhancing settlement infrastructure across provinces and territories. Personally, I am exhausted by this narrative that we don't have enough to support immigrants when we have wealth and opportunity and resource hoarding at levels we have never seen before here. We absolutely have enough to support everybody, but not when you're allowed to just win capitalism over and over and over, collect billions of dollars, give out handouts to your buddies, and then argue for a free market. I don't understand how this is still the argument that we're having. It seems really out of touch with the economic reality of the nation state, but we do have a platform, and it is also involves policies expanding to welcome targeted professionals from the U.S., including scientists, journalists, doctors, and others affected by the Republican administration. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anybody else want to comment on immigration before we move on to the next question? All right, our next question is going to do with our Indigenous communities, and I'm going to reference the recent federal government, so I mean governments in power nationally. Have they done enough to reconcile relations with Indigenous communities, and what will a government led by your party do in future in this regard? And Jasmine, we'll start with you, and then Emma, and then Michelle.
Yeah, certainly. I do take issue with calling Indigenous nations or communities like our nations, because it's very paternalistic, and I don't agree with that. I don't stand for that. Yes, we're looking to completely implement the UNDRIP, the UN Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, and to follow through on all recommendations from both the Truth and Reconciliation Commission and the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls Inquiry, to support Indigenous-led justice and healing initiatives, including ending the Indian Act in collaboration with community and funding community efforts to search former residential school sites. And no, I don't believe any government has done nearly enough. Yeah.
Emma, Indigenous communities, your thoughts?
I agree. No government has done anywhere near enough on the path to reconciliation. But we need to work collaboratively with the First Nation to develop our natural resources. People are constantly talking about opening up the Ring of Fire with just zero regard for the fact that's not our land, and that it is a discussion and a collaboration and to be decided by our First Nation community, not ours, sorry.
I got you.
Yeah. And then under Prime Minister Mark Carney already understanding that we need to ensure First Nations access to basic services and enshrining water into law to protect it.
Thank you, Emma. And Michelle?
Yes, thank you. I think Canada has an incredible history and a great opportunity going forward. I've had the privilege to work for the last 4 years doing some good work around truth and reconciliation, but one of the things that that I was very proud about was the red dress alert system. So this was to implement a national red dress alert system to ensure rapid response and to raise the public awareness when an Indigenous woman, girl, or two-spirit person goes missing. So I did a lot of work with this on the status of women. But I think the big piece that's going to really explode opportunity for everybody is a development and collaborating with Indigenous and First Nations where their voice is at the table. And I'll give an example that was done. It's the largest in Canada. It's Cedar LNG, which is a majority Indigenous-owned project in LNG Canada, which has strong emphasis on Indigenous partnerships. These projects aim to create jobs, stimulate economic growth, and provide opportunities for Indigenous communities in the energy industry. It's huge. There was 18 of these on the table in 2015, and they were all dissolved. This was the only one that's been developed, and it took 13 years to happen. And it is going to be transformative. And as with the Ring of Fire, you have to have this collaboration and discussion at the table. And I think we have a long way to go, but I think, nothing about us without us is critical, including the people who want resource development as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. One of the topics, and I know it's been raised when we talk about affordability, but what's something that's critically important is housing in the community. And we're going to start with Emma, and then Michelle, and then Jasmine. Like many communities across Canada, Peterborough is facing an affordable housing crisis. What is the federal government's role in fixing this problem, and what will your party do to ensure that people have appropriate housing in the very near future?
Under the Liberal government, the federal government is getting back into the business of home building with Build Canada Homes. At almost every retirement residence I have visited, there are proud people in the audience who love to regale me in stories about their wartime home and how after the Second World War, they were lucky enough to be able to move into a wartime home and how they are so well built and that they are still being passed along today. And they'll even go into stories about how when they tried to renovate them and tried to tear down parts of them, that it was almost impossible because they were so well built. So we are going to double the pace of new construction. We are going to invest $25 billion into financing for innovative prefabricated homes builders, because I think not enough people know how far prefabricated homes have come, how quickly they can be built, how we can invest in the resources that Canada has to make sure that we are able to build them quickly, but affordably and well.
Thank you, Emma. And Michelle, we'll move over to you, and what will your party do to address this problem?
Well, I think the first thing to address is, what Ms. Harrison just said is exactly what we heard in 2015. The Liberals were going to get into the business of home building, and housing prices have doubled. And the Auditor General did a report in 2022 where the Liberals spent $4.5 billion to reduce homelessness, and it increased 100%. They actually didn't even know if any of that money made a difference or not. You have to have accountability when you are dealing with taxpayer money. This is absurd to spend $4.5 billion and not know what happened in it. And Kim Moody, who's the founder of Moody's Tax, Moody's private client, she said, anyone who believes $500,000 homes per year is achievable should spend 5 minutes with Canada's home builders. If Mark Carney truly understood history or basic economics, he'd understand that real solutions come from unleashing market forces, not failed government tax vanity projects dressed up as housing plans. So what will the Conservatives do? The major cost of housing right now is taxes, home building taxes. So the Conservatives are promising to cut the GST on new homes up to $1.3 million. But the big one is the development fees. Here in Peterborough is a perfect example of this. The municipality is going to increase development fees by 50%. That's going to mean that it's going to cost $70,000 just in tax before a shovel even hits the ground. That's absurd. You can't do that. So we're going to incentivize municipalities to drop those development fees by giving a carrot as well, incentivizing them. And we have to, you can't keep doing the same thing and expect different results, folks. And so we've got to get the economy going. And we have obviously trades workers to build those homes. So we're going to invest in 350,000 trade workers, as well as one-stop shop for permits. Thank you.
Thanks, Michelle. Jasmine, what's the Green Party's plan for housing affordability?
Definitely. We're looking to close loopholes that allow money laundering through real estate, and that would eliminate the tax advantage for real estate investment trusts. We're also looking to address the housing crisis through proposing banning corporate purchases of single-family homes, using legal covenants to ensure publicly funding housing remains permanently available, and to advocate for intergenerational co-housing models. And the second part to this is, of course, universal basic income and radical tax reform, right? When we can start to close that gap between the people that hoard all of the wealth and the folks of us that work 6 jobs and still will never afford a home. None of these things are going to work without addressing that. So there's multiple levels.
All right. Sorry, go ahead, Emma.
Michelle, if you were at the CBC debate last week, you would have sat with us on the many graphs that the economists had showing us just what Canada was doing and what is possible and how Canadians came together after the Second World War to build housing. Mm-hmm. So based on your logic, so just because we've done it before, why couldn't we do it again? Under new leadership, under new plan, under new threats to our sovereignty and to our people, what would stop us from doing it again? Well, because history has shown us we can do it. And so are Canadians different now than they were then?
So what has your Liberal Party done in the last 10 years?
Prime Minister Mark Carney just became the leader of the Liberal Party.
But
that is the party.
But he's been advising Justin Trudeau for the last 5 years. That is the party I am running for now, and that is the party that is going to see us through this. But he's
who
advised
understands
him for
economics
the last 5
and understands that we are strong and amazing people. We have to your note, we have everything we could possibly need to thrive. We have done it before. The incredible people who came home after fighting the Second World War needed housing. We needed victory gardens. We came together and we figured it out. And with the support of the federal government understanding that, with the innovation that has come forward, with prefabricated homes, with the amount of soft lumber we have, breaking down interprovincial trade barriers, it's all setting us up to be able to do so. So we can build deeply affordable homes. And then invest in student and senior housing explicitly as well. That's under our party's platform as well. We have done it before, we can do it again. We are not weak, we are not broken. We are not broken.
Your party hasn't done anything before. You've doubled housing costs, and if you want to know how well tents are going, go outside and see them. Your party has not done anything for housing. Nothing. You've doubled the cost of housing.
You voted against guaranteed basic income, right? It's like these things cannot be taken on their own. We have to look at everything as the complex.
They've been in power for 10 years, and housing has never been more expensive.
But everything is getting worse, and even things provincially under the provincial government, not to pass the buck, are getting worse. We are driving off a cliff together. The right and the left, like wing parties, we are going in the same direction. So if you're talking about Canada Strong, which is annoying because there's so much divide, right? Which is obviously what's happening, and it's obviously being influenced by the Republican administration. But I don't have time for that. I don't have time for us misusing the word insanity, which is so ableist, to try to make a very flimsy point, because we are all in this together. I do not agree with what the Liberal Party has done. I have not voted Liberal. I probably will never vote Liberal. I agree with a lot of that. But I also think saying you're not going to do it because you haven't done it is preposterous, because we can hold up a mirror and do that too. For your voting record, you want to represent the constituents, you have to be willing to change a little bit. You have to be willing to be a bit braver with your decisions. So, you can't hold people hostage to their past all the time. We have to be able to move forward.
Michelle, do you want to respond? Or?
Listen, I think the people of Peterborough know what housing has happened in the last 10 years. I don't need to tell them. They're dealing with it. They can't find housing. Kids are living in their parents' basements. This is the reality of policy. There are real human consequences. That's the track record of the Liberals.
All right, folks, we're going to stay on infrastructure, and Michelle, we're going to come back to you, and we're going to draw the county in. We're in Peterborough riding. We retained a couple of townships. We lost a couple to our neighbors to the west, but the county of Peterborough, which hosts several of our communities, would like to see more infrastructure funding for not only housing, which we just talked about, but water and sewer services. Michelle, what would your government do to address this concern, this kind of breaking news from Peterborough County just this week?
Yeah, I mean, obviously infrastructure is a massive component to housing. If you don't have the infrastructure, you can't build. So Peterborough contractors are absolutely locked out of federal projects due to overcomplicated bidding rules. Our rural roads are neglected. This is what's happening. I think we're the third slowest permitting process in the OECD. You can't build anything in this country. It is too challenging. So what do we have for policy proposals? Canada First shovel-ready zones, so designated zones where permits and zoning are already pre-approved. Did you know that it takes 17 years right now to make land ready for industry, housing, and power projects, which is absurd. One and done rule, so one-stop shop for all resource project approvals, one application, one environmental review approved in 6 to 12 months, and prioritize projects like LNG Canada Phase 2 to create jobs and secure energy. Obviously the Ring of Fire, this is a significant transformative development in our province and in our country, valued at $1 trillion. So we would commit to $1 billion in road access for First Nations and resource companies. Energy corridor, this is a huge one and should have been done a long time ago. National infrastructure route for pipelines, rail, and transmission lines moving our resources within Canada, not through the US. And red tape reduction by 25%. So for every $1 in new compliance costs, cut $2 elsewhere. This is annual audits by the Auditor General as opposed to the government. So they are held to account to ensure that this is made. And I just want to say, under the Liberals, 149,000 federal regulations, which is up 20,000 since Trudeau took office, and we have lost 16 energy projects worth $176 billion.
Okay, Michelle, Jasmine, we're going to move to you on infrastructure, and how would you address the rural infrastructure issues like water and sewer?
Certainly. Are you asking in the Peterborough context specifically?
Yeah, Peterborough. Yeah, it's a local issue to do with.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Well, obviously the federal government doesn't have their hands in Peterborough local infrastructure. If I were the MP, I would be pushing very hard to secure funding and to also reduce some of the red tape. You know, one of the problems with like the coldness of modernity is that the bureaucratic processes that we have to go through are supremely inefficient. Right, so increasing efficiency and advocating for better funding of municipal services and for the trades to increase accessible and clean infrastructure. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Emma.
I'm not sure people are aware of how much has been passed provincially to municipalities and how they're struggling to keep up with infrastructure due to the fact that they are now burdened with things the province used to take care of. So I think that's really important in a conversation I've had a lot with municipal government and how they're struggling. So how will the federal government help? We will provide capital to make sure that infrastructure is in place for when the municipalities are ready to get going on these projects, including even just broadband. You know, I don't think people know in rural Ontario, across rural Canada, broadband is a huge issue. We saw that in COVID when kids went home and had to do school work from home, and that broadband is lacking, and it's an accessibility issue as well. We will reduce red tape as well, because that is stopping a lot of projects from happening. And then also, again, going with if the province has done an assessment, that the federal government will support moving forward on those projects.
Thank you. Well, we're getting close to closing statements. I'm going to change the rules a bit. I'm going to give you 1 minute to answer this last question, because I did promise we would talk about U.S. tariffs. You each have 1 minute. I'm going to start with Emma, Jasmine, then Michelle. The issue of U.S. tariffs' impact on Canada is ever changing. What would your government do to ensure that Canadian companies can survive this assault and be prepared for future trade impacts beyond national control? Emma, we'll start with you.
Certainly. We will, I'm going to talk really fast this time, create a $2 billion strategic response fund to boost the auto sector, as well as building an all-in auto sector in Canada, investing heavily in skilled trades, as well as in people who are willing to take on those apprenticeships, because we're missing that piece of the puzzle. People go to school, they go get all the education they need for their apprenticeship, but then unable to secure that, as well as inject $5 billion into a trade diversification fund to build trade facility infrastructure such as airport, ports, road and railroads, and that investing the reciprocal tariffs that we are collecting right back into those industries who are being impacted, and the people. That's the most important part, is the people who are actually being impacted by these tariffs. And yes, business, but those are the people who make sure they stay afloat.
Great, thank you, and thank you for squeezing that in. And you don't have to talk quite as fast, but if you want to, I'll give you each a minute. Yes, thank you. Jasmine, it's your time. Yeah.
I think it's important to review laws and economic safeguards to protect Canadian sovereignty from foreign-backed corporate strategies designed to manipulate and undermine our democracy, economy, and resource independence. We want to deny platforms to far-right figures like Donald Trump, including banning attendance at global summits held in Canada. We're also looking to collaborate with democratic global partners to push back against economic coercion from authoritarian-leaning U.S. leadership, including rethinking Canada's role in intelligence sharing alliances that prioritize imperial agendas over democratic integrity, and finally to create a resource reserves, which I know I won't beat the horse into the ground. I've talked about it in every single debate so far. So if you want to know more about that, you can send me an email.
Thank you, Jasmine. And Michelle, you do have 1 minute before we get into closing.
Can I get you to say the question again?
Oh, yes, sure. Just asking about what will your government do to ensure Canadian companies can survive this tariff impacts from the U.S.?
Okay, so we have a couple of things. The one I want to say is the Canada First Reinvestment Tax Cut. This is a huge one. So no capital gains on Canadian asset sales if reinvested in Canada. So this is going to be a huge investment. Canada lost $460 billion in investments in 2023. That's $11,500 per Canadian. We will also have the Keep Canadians Work Fund to protect workers from tariffs, targeted, timely, and temporary loans to keep workers. We will also renegotiate CUSMA, strengthening our sovereignty and redirecting trade revenue to the military and tax cuts other than government coffers. And I think the big message I want to give to people is we absolutely need to restore our relationship with the United States. And we need an effective leader to do this. And we need to stand up, and we need to be standing on our own 2 feet and developing in our resources. But we absolutely need to rebuild this relationship. They need us.
Great, thank you, Michelle, and I want to thank all the candidates for your intense discussion and great responses to the questions we've had here today. We're going to move into closing remarks, and by the draw earlier, the lead-off for that will be Jasmine, followed by Emma, followed by Michelle, and you have 2 minutes maximum you can use for closing remarks. And Jasmine Rain, we'll turn it over to you.
Thank you very much. First of all, I'm very grateful to have been given the opportunity to be here today and talk with you all and to debate with my fellow candidates. It's an immense privilege to be given this platform. I am very realistic about what it means to be running Green in Peterborough during this election. I know what's happening. I know that folks are scared and voting strategically, and I completely understand that. I also want to encourage everybody to talk to the people around you who are not involved in democratic processes because they don't believe in the iteration of democracy that we have right now, and they're right to be suspicious. They're right not to believe. So have those conversations, look at all of our platforms, fact check what we're telling to you, and decide for yourself who you're going to vote for. Put your political ideologies aside and think about what makes the most real sense for you. I could say more, but maybe I'll leave it there. Thank you.
It's totally up to you, and thank you, Jasmine, for those closing remarks. Emma Harrison, we'll move over to you.
To reiterate off of Jazz, thank you for having us and the privilege to be able to speak more to our community about our values and who we are as people and our parties. So there's been a lot of talk about the critical nature of this election, and I hear it a lot, the retirement residents, that they understand and know how crucial this election is, and for me it is the most critical election that I can remember. For me, this is our time as Canadians to choose who we are as a people and what we represent. I know that we are strong, incredibly resilient, kind, and proud. And when someone needs help, people gather around and lift them up within our communities. That is also what we need now across our country. We must stay united and keep our values as people close to our hearts. I refuse to accept that we are broken, because I know and you know we are not. Over the next 4 years, incredible things are going to happen. We will turn the adversity that we have faced into positive change for our country, starting by selecting leaders and representatives who know that to be true. That is why I'm here. I'm ready to listen, work collaboratively, move Canada forward, and keep Canada strong. I would really appreciate your support in becoming your next member of Parliament on April 28th. Thank you, Jay.
For me, I have the privilege to knock on thousands of doors, and I went to this one lady's door and I knocked on the door and she came out. She had a big white dog and she's holding the dog back because the dog's barking and she's trying to get out, and there's two little kids and the one kid's behind her leg and the other kid's behind her leg, and she's like, yeah. And I said, hi, I'm Michelle Ferreri and I'm asking for your vote on April 28th. And she's like, yeah. And she was frustrated. She was, she's surviving. She's not living. And she said, I said, is there anything that matters to you? And she looked at me very directly and she said, I just want to be able to afford to live. And her eyes welled up with tears, and I thought, she said, I'm sorry I'm so emotional. She said, I'm so sorry I'm so emotional. She said, my husband just had to leave. He had to take a job in another city because he couldn't find work here, and our family is separated. We're doing everything that's asked of us, and we can't make ends meet. And that is the crux of this election issue. Canadians literally can't afford a fourth Liberal term. We have to restore affordability. And we have children who can't live, or who are living in their parents' basement. So on April 28th, I'm asking for you to vote for hope. I'm asking for you to vote for a change. We have 26 great policies, including cutting income tax by 15%, invest in the trades to get our resources and houses built, cut the GST on new homes, cut the red tape and speed up permitting. Every threat has a silver lining. Canada should be the richest country in the world, and we can be. On April 28th, vote for me, Michelle Ferreri. Vote for hope, vote for a change. Thank you so much.
Great, thank you, Michelle, and thank you all candidates. It's been a pleasure being here to share all these thoughts and let our audience learn a little bit more about your opinions, your party's opinions going forward in the future. I want to thank you and wish you well. A few more days left in the campaign, whatever the future may hold, wish you all the best. And I want to thank the crew and the camera crew, the volunteers here, and even the person that was supposed to time people. They didn't have to be put to too much work today, but we had them on here. But you guys were just great in keeping into the time limits, having some great dialogue, and we'll see what happens on April 28th. We want to remind our members, our audience, to get out and vote. This is your opportunity to have a say in the future of Peterborough riding and the future of Canada. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time on YourVote.
Thanks,
Not
Jay.
for a few years.